Oh, hello. How you guys doing today? The Oh Hello podcast is back here, minus a John Whalen. It's a little bit sad to see, but John Whalen, he's dealing with his own stuff. He talked about it with having to take a step back from the podcast. We'll see how much he's going to be on. Might see some new faces while this stuff is going on, but a couple of familiar faces today. Isaac, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, doing good. Definitely ready to go to sleep because we do film these podcasts early in the morning and I work night shift. But yeah, definitely ready to get this rocking and rolling.
For sure, for sure. Um, I get that too. Like waking up for me is a little bit of a challenge, but you needing to stay up. You're definitely making sacrifices, uh, kind of like an unsung hero in a way for the Oh
Oh
Hello
yeah, it's
podcast.
it's it's definitely worth it though, especially getting this thing rolling and us interacting with people on social media and stuff with our content. So it's definitely worth it.
Well, I don't think today's episode is going to be super long because the whole point of today's episode is to basically have a debate between me and Isaac about the SEC versus the Big Ten. Now, there's no moderator for the debate, so me and Isaac are going to have to basically have the respect and self control. I think we can do it, though I don't know. I'm pretty disrespectful over here,
I
so
don't know. We might get heated, Bosh.
might have our moments, but we have the maturity. We can reel each other back in. So Big Ten versus SEC. Isaac, I just want to kind of know like if you got like some sort of opening statement here where you just want to kind of make your claim about the SEC.
Yeah. So with these past 3 years and the past three national championships coming from the Big Ten, I think that the SEC has kind of been disrespected. If you look back through the years with the playoffs, there's been multiple years where we've gotten the most teams in the playoff. People are going to say, "Oh, ESPN bias." I don't think that we could make a huge case for any of those teams really not getting in. I know some people will complain about the this year's Alabama taking Notre Dame's place, but that's a debatable topic. I honestly think where the Big Ten has had the edge these past 3 years is the continuity and the consistency in coaching, and that's really it. I mean, we've seen it, big time schools in the SEC really have hit or miss years, and I feel like that's what was keeping us back. I also think that Big Ten fans like to use the past 3 years because it suits them better. I think that they're taking too small of a sample size to really gauge what the dominance for the Big Ten is going to look like in the future, and that's really the opening statement that I have.
Whew. Okay, well, there's a lot to get into, but I'm gonna make my own opening statement and kind of get into some of those points there later. So the big thing with the Big Ten being better is definitely obviously you could point to the championships that they have had the last 3 years, and specifically having to go through the SEC to do so. You look at what Indiana did to Alabama, who was the SEC runner up. You look at what Ohio State did to Tennessee and Texas, and Michigan, what they did to Alabama. Being able to beat the SEC in the playoff is really important. But I also think that a lot of times what kind of helps the SEC in the argument is the depth of the conference. But I think the Big Ten's depth is completely underrated. I think when you look at last year, Illinois got a bad rap for no reason. They beat the crap out of the ACC champion. They only lost to good teams for the most part. And same was kind of the case with Iowa. Only lost to good teams, lost to teams within conference play who contended for a title. USC was pretty good. Michigan, all things considered, pretty good. There was a lot better depth in the Big Ten than what people want to give credit. And like I mentioned, playoff results, bowl results too. A lot of people just completely silence the bowl results. The issue is if we don't look at bowl results and out of conference, which there isn't a lot of cross conference play between the two, how are we supposed to gauge the results on the football field? If we can't look at bowl games and non conference games, but specifically bowl games, because most of the non conference games between the two conferences happen there, if that doesn't matter, then how do we determine this? I think it's got to matter to a certain degree. I think that you had games like Iowa and Vanderbilt that were very indicative. I know you, as a Tennessee fan, don't like the Illinois game, but it kind of did show that they can compete at that level. So, what's
And
your response to that?
I'm not disagreeing with you there, Bosch. I do think that they compete, but with these bowl games, I think that we have to add context to them. Okay, and I know you don't like talking about this because it kind of swats down your excuse to the bowl games. Is that look at how many starters some of these SEC teams that were going against Big Ten teams had out because they declared for the draft. I know in particular Tennessee had 11 or 12 starters out, and Illinois only had it was either 5 or 6 starters out. And to that point, I think NIL has kind of changed the game where these rosters, especially on the SEC side, are not stacked with talent like they were in the 2010s. You can't just hoard that stuff because somebody is going to go somewhere else and play with a bag. In the 2010s, we were able to beat Big Ten teams in bowl games with our second strings just because there was so much talent on the field. We were all hoarding it. Whereas now, if you're an SEC school and you have 11 starters out because they declared for the draft, it's a thin lineup. You know what I'm saying? So I think that yes, we can use bowl games to kind of gauge where teams are at going into the next season, but I don't think that we should be putting a whole lot of weight into these bowl games.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you that these bowl games need to be put into context, but I think the big thing that you have to kind of look at with this situation with the bowl games is which coaching staff looks to have their teams more prepared. That's going to be indicative of the health of a program, and which coaching staff can really get the buy-in from their teams. So like a Big Ten team you could criticize was USC for the way they collapsed down the stretch of their bowl game and ended up giving that game away to TCU. So how these programs are run, how they respond in a bowl game is very indicative of that. You kind of saw that with Iowa specifically. I think Iowa really showed that they have a lot of pride within their program. They're going to care to come out and give it their all. And, Vanderbilt only had one starter out in that situation. So obviously, you being a Tennessee fan, you're not going to defend Vanderbilt too much.
No,
but
I'm not going to defend Vanderbilt at all. They should have won that game, and they let Iowa walk all over them. So I do give Iowa their flowers. Let's be for real here. Kirk Ferentz, in his how many years has he coached at Iowa?
26,
In
25.
his 26, 25 years of coaching at Iowa, there's been a couple of teams that have been an offensive way away from making a Big Ten championship and possibly even being a playoff contender. So I have mad respect for Iowa and Kirk Ferentz and all of the players that he's put into the league as well when it comes to O linemen and tight ends. But on that note, like you said, yes, we have to put context behind these bowl games, and I think that we should put more weight into regular season conference games than bowl game non-con. I'm going to be honest. The Ohio State Texas game last year, that's what we should be looking at. You know what I'm saying? And I think that with these non-cons, we're fixing to start to see it because now the SEC has to play 3 non-con games. 2 of those opponents have to be Power 4. So we're fixing to start seeing regular season non-conference like the Oklahoma-Michigan. I know Alabama, they have the Florida State-Wisconsin game that I think they're playing this upcoming year. And then they're going to be playing Ohio State in 2027 and 2028. We're fixing to start seeing these non-con games being played in the regular season, and I think that we're making a jump too soon whenever it comes to comparing these two conferences and crowning, even though I will give it to the Big Ten. They've won the last three national championships.
Well, I mean, everything you say is pretty valid. Like, I'm not going to disagree that I want to see these regular season matchups more than I want to see these bowl games. I mean, that's 100% the case. I mostly mention the bowl games because that is the only real data point we have head to head, or the most significant, because those cross conference matchups aren't happening as often. They're a little bit one-offs. Texas and Ohio State, Oklahoma and Michigan. I can't even think of any other. Wisconsin and Alabama, which to me is not top versus top. It's bottom versus top. So
you also had that. I know it's not Big Ten, but you also had the A&M Notre Dame game.
Right.
That's also being played this year as well.
And look, Notre Dame being from the region, they're more a Big Ten fit than anything else. And I think for me, it's just kind of like a regionality thing more than anything. But I try not to include Notre Dame because obviously people would find that flawed and it would make them mad. But
yeah.
And I get that, but there is a certain amount of like, well, look at what Notre Dame's doing too. You know, like that's kind of my thought process. But the big question I have for you, Isaac, and I just kind of want you to think about this for a second. You talked about the most teams in the college football playoff, specifically last year. How much of that is affected? And you guys are going to 9 conference games, so it's not like this is a criticism of the SEC anymore. But how much of that was affected by the fact that the Big Ten played 9 conference games and the SEC played 8?
I don't think that it was affected a whole lot. And the reason I think that is because of the Big Ten, how big that conference is. There's, 18 teams in the Big Ten now?
Yeah.
I think the expansions that you guys have has kind of watered down the conference a bit. I think that there's a large gap between the top of the top and the bottom of the bottom, and then there's those like middle pack teams who we really can't gauge how good they are throughout the season, and maybe not even until the end of the season, like you said, whenever they play these bowl games. So, I mean, I think that, yes, we're going to see less teams from the SEC in the college football playoffs because of the 9-game schedule. We're going to separate the boys to men because of this 9-game schedule. But at the same time, it's not like all of these top-notch teams, well, Texas, especially whenever they joined the SEC, their schedule was atrocious. But it's not like we're going to see these top-notch teams, or we didn't see these top-notch teams play other top-notch teams in the SEC.
Okay, so my whole argument, though, is that that's another opportunity to lose. And, you know, I think both these teams were good, but I also think both of these teams' conference schedules were pretty favorable. Ole Miss, Texas A&M. 2 best overall records within the SEC, other than Georgia. Georgia joined them, but those 2 teams that made the playoff, they weren't really challenged as far as in-conference play too much. When you look at Ole Miss's case, too, Ole Miss wasn't really challenged out of conference either. Not to the degree that some of these other teams in the SEC were. So, one thing, it's unfair to the other SEC teams. It was, for sure. And number 2, the biggest issue I have is the Big Ten teams at some point ran into one of the other top dogs. So Ohio State probably had one of the weaker schedules within the Big Tens, especially for any contender. Oregon played a much tougher schedule. Indiana played a much tougher schedule than Ohio State. But Ohio State ended up number 1 because they got the favorable schedule. They made the conference championship. That's a big reason why. And number 2, they did still have to go through Michigan and Indiana. those extra games added on for the Big Ten cost playoff spots like Michigan when they had to go to USC when they had to play at Oregon. Examples like that kept teams away from the playoff. That if you just take out one game, and granted you cherry pick the game, but if you take out one game and you kind of get a little bit luckier with the schedule, all of a sudden those are playoff teams.
And I don't disagree with you, Bosch. I do think that USC had the potential to go to the playoffs last year. Michigan's a little bit of a different story because I just don't think that they were there yet, especially with how abysmal that coaching staff was. Talk about Bryce Underwood. Dude didn't have a quarterback coach.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very poorly ran, and I'm extremely disappointed in how Michigan ran that organization last year. But USC 100%, they were a game away. But I almost feel like, and this is the issue that I have with that argument, is we saw it from Texas fans this year, talking about the Florida game. Okay, Florida is not the reason that you did not go to the playoffs. The reason that you did not go to the playoffs was because you lost versus Ohio State. So I feel like we get caught up in certain losses and certain wins, and I think that your worst loss is to blame for you not making the playoffs, not your best loss. You know what I'm saying? So I think that if we're going to use that excuse for a team like USC, then that opens the door for a team like Texas and maybe even Vanderbilt too, because I know Vanderbilt was on the fringe as well.
Okay, but again, if you add a tough conference game for Texas A&M Vanderbilt, like they're not even in the discussion. If you add a tougher conference game for Alabama, maybe they don't even make the SEC championship. Like, what if Alabama had to play Ole Miss?
Okay. Let me ask you this: what tough conference game that Texas didn't already have would you add for them? Because keep in mind, Texas last year was the only team in the NCAA to have not one, not two, but 3 top 10 wins that season. So what other tough game would you add?
Let's see. They beat A&M. They beat Vanderbilt. Who else did they beat?
The other top 10 win was, it came later in the stretch.
Yeah, I mean all 3 of them came later. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because that's whenever they started clicking.
They didn't beat Georgia. They got their butts whooped.
Yeah, that was pretty much the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I can't think of it, but I'll move on from that point. When you compare Texas's resume from last year, though, I mean, bottom line is like 6-2 within the conference. Yeah, the Ohio State game didn't cost them, and I think that's what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah, no, it was the Florida game that cost them, not the Ohio State.
I think you said it backwards, but I knew what you meant. So, when you're comparing Texas's resume and talking about how they were, that game away from the college football playoff, the issue is with that argument is
Oklahoma. Sorry, go ahead. That was the third game. Oklahoma.
Right. Oklahoma.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to make an argument that Texas did have a tough schedule, fair. They did have a pretty tough schedule. They're going to have a tough schedule this upcoming year. But again, the thing with Texas is like losing that game you're not supposed to. That's going to destroy you no matter what, whether it's 8 or 9 conference games, no matter if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC. That could ruin your playoff hopes. I mean, let's use a hypothetical. It's going to happen the same way with Michigan. They lose to a playoff team in Oklahoma. Let's say they lose to Ohio State at the end of the year because they're not taking that rivalry back ever again. What if they end up losing, and I can't remember their schedule top of my head, but what if they end up losing to somebody they're not supposed to at some point this year? Like, let's say they lose to Northwestern. I don't even know if they play Northwestern. I don't think they do. But take it as an example. What if they lose to Northwestern just randomly? And that's the reason they get left out of the playoff. You think that that's going to be more of an argument for why the Big Ten is weaker or not?
If they lose it, so they lose to Ohio State, they lose to Oklahoma, and then they have a random loss against Northwestern.
Yeah. That going to be a point to say that the Big Ten is weaker?
It's a double-edged sword. No, because of the fact that Northwestern, just like the South Carolinas of the world and the SEC are able to kind of every now and then compete with the big dogs, and then there's an edge of that sword where you're like, yes, because of the fact that you have your top dogs losing to a school who is a doctor school. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a double-edged sword with that. I would probably lean more on the yes side. That would show the strength of the conference, just because you have these lower tier schools who show glimpses of, hey, we're not very far. But I mean, it just depends. You have to add context to that sort of situation.
I mean, hey, that brings up a good point, because a lot of the arguments that helps the SEC through these last 3 years, where the Big Ten's been pretty much dominating both the playoff and just national championships as a whole, is how many teams within these conferences can really rise to the top of the conference, who can have a good year and end up in the playoff. And I think a lot of the argument is that there's more teams in the SEC, and that I agree with. But is that only because the last 3 years the top of the SEC hasn't been as strong as the top of the Big Ten? So if those teams in the middle are about the same, because the top of the Big Ten rises so much above the top of the SEC, they look much farther away than those teams who are on the same plane. You get what I'm saying?
And no, I completely understand that, but let me add this in there. Okay? Would you not agree that the competitiveness of the conference somewhat dictates how stacked that conference is?
To a certain extent, yeah.
Because here's the point that I'm going to make off this. Big Ten since 2023, heck, even 2022. I'll say 2022 is where it really started. We've been seeing year after year the Big Ten start to get more competitive and more competitive, even with those middle pack schools like Iowa. Okay? SEC. We can all agree SEC is a top 2 conference in the nation. Mm-hmm. Okay? We've always, and even more recently, been more competitive year after year after year. The thing that dictates whether you're a top 2 conference in the nation is how competitive your conference actually is. Let's use the Big 12, for example. Okay? The Big 12, after about week 6 or 7, we knew who was going to win that conference. We knew. It was Texas Tech. They were steamrolling everybody. I don't think I heard one person tell me after they beat BYU that BYU stood a chance in that Big 12 championship. So I think that kind of bleeds into how good the actual conference is.
Well, my issue with that, though, is that was last season, and that wasn't the case the year before. The year before, the Big 12 was a really chaotic conference, but I still don't think that because it was chaotic in the Big 12, you can make the argument that they were still better, even though that was probably the most competitive conference in 2024, top to bottom. They had the most chaos within a regular season. They had more chaos than the SEC and the Big Ten. It doesn't mean to me that they're a better conference.
Well, keep in mind, like the SEC and like the Big Ten and the SEC, it's chaos, but it's controlled chaos. With certain matchups, you know the outcome. Like Iowa and let's say Iowa and Ohio State play, okay? And it's going into the fourth quarter, and Iowa has a 7-point lead. Okay, I'm still going to be confident that Ohio State can pull that out because Ohio State has been a great program over the years, and Ohio State's probably going to pull it out. Just like Indiana versus Penn State this year. Indiana wins it off of a walk-off touchdown. Okay, I throughout that game, I didn't really have doubts that Indiana was going to lose that game. It's just going through the growing pains.
Yeah, but I will say like this happens with me all the time where I get that feeling like look they're gonna win and it's gonna be whatever, they're gonna find a way to win this game whoever it may be. Like a good example is Alabama multiple times, but specifically the Florida State game week 1. But even the Oklahoma game, there were moves where I'm like, they're going to find a way to win. They didn't. So, how do you decipher who are those teams that kind of are upset proof in those ways? Like you're going to have belief in them down the stretch.
I think coaches or programs with solidified head coaches. Obviously, Kurt Cignetti. Kurt Cignetti has done one of the greatest turnaround jobs we've ever seen in the history of the sport. He's shown flashes or personality traits of Nick Saban. Not there yet, but he's shown flashes. Ryan Day of Ohio State, very consistent. He's going to turn out a 10 to 11 win season every year. Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart has been in situations so much where he should have lost the game, okay? And he ends up pulling it out. 2025 at Neyland in Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it takes a solidified head coach that we know is going to make the right decisions, like Kurt Cignetti, like Ryan Day, like Kirby Smart, to have belief in a team like that.
Well, I think we're having a good discussion, and this is going to be a little shorter because it's a 2-man flow, and that's fine. But I'm going to float this idea out there, kind of doing this live. We didn't prepare for this at all, but this is a nice little challenge. We go back and forth and we rank each other's conference. So we start at number 1. I name who I believe is the top SEC program right now. And then you tell me who the top Big Ten program is. And we go down, but we want to stop and compare 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3. Do you like that idea or not really?
Yeah, no, we can go for it. We can go for it.
I mean, this is no preparation, by the way, for everybody out there. This is just something I kind of used improv for and just thought of that we could do for fun to close this episode out. So don't make fun of us.
Let me ask you this: Are we ranking them based on the expectations that we have for them this year?
Yeah, I was like, I mean, sure, that's fine. I was kind of like thinking state of the program in general.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
But
we can do that.
That's largely tied into how we expect them to do this upcoming year. Because to be quite honest with you, this is going to completely ruin the debate. But I don't really care. When it comes to this upcoming year, doing all these previews, I firmly expect for the SEC to be much, much deeper than the Big Ten this upcoming year. And much deeper than it probably has been the last 2 years. So that aside, we just state of the program, not individualized teams. I'll start the number 1 program, in my opinion, within the SEC is a program who's won it back-to-back years in the SEC. I'm taking Georgia.
Okay. Number 1 program in the Big Ten, the current state of it, I'm going to go with Indiana.
That's fair. I mean, I get it. I worry about sustainability a little bit, but not that much with that guy, Kurt Cignetti. All right, so let's kind of have a discussion between Georgia, Indiana, just a brief one, and we're not going to do this 16 down because that would be mind-boggling, but
yeah.
Georgia and Indiana. Look, Indiana, what they've been able to do, they did it without talent. I think once you start getting talent in the door, the ceiling is completely blown off and they can accomplish basically anything. And you've kind of seen Georgia fall off a little bit, specifically fall to kind of like a little bit of a more vulnerable version of themselves, and it's specifically because the depth's not there like it was in 21 and 22 when they won those back-to-back championships. So, how do you compare these two programs right now?
So I think that I like the current state of Indiana better than I do Georgia. And that's nothing against Georgia. Kirby Smart, you're talking and yes, like you said, Bosch. I'm worried too about the sustainability of Indiana. But as of right now, how they've worked out the transfer portal and the recruiting class and things like that for this upcoming year, I think that they can replicate or come close to what they did last year. With Georgia, okay, this is something that I wanted to talk about because you said it like a flyby comment. There's two programs that I know of in the SEC that if they're not in a national championship game, Big Ten fans for some reason use the words "falling off,"
Well,
and that's Georgia and Alabama.
you're right.
Time out, because I wanna go through this, and this is not aimed at you, Bosch. This is Big Ten fans in general. Keep in mind, Georgia won the SEC last year. They won 12 games, or 11 in the regular season because they lost to Alabama. Alabama is the only program in the history of the sport to ever go to an SEC championship, go to the playoffs, win the first ever away game playoffs. Keep in mind, they were the first program in playoff history to win an away game in the first round. And people want to say that they've fallen off. That astonishes me. And like I said, it's nothing like that you said, Bosch, that it's like whenever I go on social media and I'm cruising through these Big Ten fan pages, it's just astonishing to me. But with that being said, I do like the state of Indiana better. Nothing against Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart probably going to win the SEC again this year for a third time in a row. But it's just that team, it's so young. Georgia's team right now is so young. So
I mean, everything you said was fair, and yeah, I didn't really mean it like that. As myself, I mostly meant it as like, look, they were the king of the sport a couple years ago, and I just don't see them as that anymore. That's the big thing that I'm trying to get
well, I'll
across.
say this: the past 2 to 3 years have really been reloads for Georgia, and even in their reload years, they're still winning SEC championships. So I
Yeah, but
mean,
when are they going to be reloaded? Is the thing. It's like there's always
um,
been like, shoot, we got to
I
replace, and
think
it's
I think that Kirby Smart he needs to figure out how to stop the bleeding. One of the reasons why we saw um them be so young, actually the second youngest team in the SEC, was because of the fact that they either A, had starters leave for the draft, or B, had starters transfer out. So, yeah, I just think that he needs to stop the bleeding somehow.
fair, fair. All right, moving on to number two. I'm gonna take state of the program right now. I'm taking Texas. The big reason why is because I think that last year was kind of a floor set for Texas. I don't think that they're gonna really under Sark get too much worse of a spot than they were a year ago. We've seen what their ceiling is. They were the most competitive against Ohio State when they went on that run in the playoff. They were one play away the year before from a national title game in which I think that they would have matched up with Michigan fantastically. This Texas team is in a very stable spot as a program. I think it's a little bit underrated. I think some SEC fans, probably not you, I don't think you, some SEC fans would push back against that. I think if John Whalen were here, he would push back against that. But I think Texas is in a very stable spot as a program.
No, I like Texas at two, honestly. I'm not going to lie. I think that the hiring of Will Muschamp for their defensive coordinator is a great hire. They got, a lot of pieces, including Collins on that defense that's coming back. And I think, like you've been saying, Bosch, I think Arch is only going to get better I don't see him having any sort of regression. I see him playing like he did in that Michigan game and getting better. With my number two, and boss, you're probably not going to like it, but I have Oregon as my number two. Look, if there was a year for Oregon to win a Big Ten championship again and make a national title game, it's this year. They have so much talent on that team. It's ridiculous. And these guys are doing nothing but developing. And if you've noticed in the past 2 years, they've been doing nothing but taking steps in order to get there. The first year in their first game in the 2024, they got steamrolled by Ohio State. Their second year, they made it to a semis. Obviously, we know how it ended versus Indiana. Dan Lanning has it headed in the right direction, and I'd put them at number two this year.
I don't disagree with you. I don't really want to have a meta argument about this, but when it comes to Indiana, they don't have the sustained success that Ohio State has. When it comes to Oregon, they don't have the accomplishments and the top end potential that Ohio State has. Ohio State has won 11 games other than the COVID year, dating back every single year, dating back and since 2011. Nobody else can say that. Ohio State is the most consistent program in the sport right now. The only thing that you fall short of if you're an Ohio State fan, and I know this, is the national titles. 2014, 2024, that's all they have in the playoff era. It's the start of each playoff era. I kind of get the vision with Dan Lanning, and I think the big thing that people need to understand is Dan Lanning and Oregon, they're Georgia before Georgia won championships. They're Ohio State and Ryan Day before they won their championship. They are the team that can't get it done right now that will eventually get it done. I fully have faith in that. I just think putting them above Ohio State or Indiana is pretty tough to do before they do it.
Yeah, and I'll bleed this into my next team, because you just got done talking about them. I have Ohio State at three,
Yeah.
and the reason I have Ohio State at three, there's two. First off, I'm not a huge Arthur Smith guy. I know that he has a good resume and all. I just don't think that was a phenomenal hire for Ohio State on the offensive side of the ball. Yes, he's going to introduce or keep rolling with that pro style offense, very NFL like that they have at Ohio State, the slower paced, play action sort of vibe that Ohio State has. I'm not the biggest Arthur Smith guy, and there's a single question mark that I have for Ohio State. And I think that they can do it, but I need to see it yet. And that's, can their offensive line get better? Can they develop? But that's why I have Ohio State at three.
2 points. 2 points to respond to that. First of all, I think that a program is not necessarily defined by whether or not they make good coordinator hires. Bad coordinator hires can ruin it, but it doesn't always ruin it, because they can basically say, okay, this isn't working, let's move on, and it's basically a 1 year snapshot of troubles versus a year to year consistent issue. And number two, you have those criticisms for Arthur Smith, but we haven't seen Oregon's play callers call plays, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. So we don't know if Oregon's situation is going to be better or not. It's a big unknown. And I think having the known that Arthur Smith is going to be great in the run game, he has NFL pedigree, and look, criticisms in the NFL, I think some of them are invalid. I liked Arthur Smith much before. People who know me and talk to me about the Steelers last year, I know plenty of Steelers fans. They would know that I was like, Arthur Smith is much better than what you had before. And I defended Arthur Smith a good bit before Ohio State. So it's not just an Ohio State thing. I don't think Arthur Smith is bad. I think his value in the run game is great. I hope it gels well with Ryan Day. I worry that it doesn't. That's what I have to say about that point. I don't want to get in a big argument about that.
Yeah, and I'll just say this just for a brief second. I mean, I I think Arthur Smith will do wonders for Bo Jackson. I think that he's going to have a breakout year for sure. The thing is can that offensive line hold up? Does it develop? Does it get better than last year? Like I was saying, and also when it comes to Oregon and Ohio State, and this is crazy to say, but I just think Oregon. I know that the play callers knew there too. I just think that Oregon has more weapons to work with. I know you guys have the biggest weapon of them all in Jeremiah Smith, but Oregon's got guys all over the field that can make plays, and I just think that there's a lot more to work with.
I think Oregon could potentially have the best receiving core in America this upcoming year. This might be the
Evan Stewart,
first time in a while.
Moore. Oh yeah,
And don't Jeremiah McClellan's another one too. Don't sleep on him. So my number 3 program, this is kind of tough because there are a lot of programs I would want to talk about here, and do you want to go 5 deep, 6 deep? How deep do you want to go here?
We'll go 6 deep. 6 deep.
6 deep. Okay.
Yeah.
Alabama. That's the program I'm taking third. It's pretty tough, and this is where you might get some winning arguments because we didn't talk about this with 2, but which program are you taking right now as far as a better overall program, Texas or Oregon?
Current state, I'd probably take Oregon in that too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I would probably take Ohio State compared to Alabama. Now, you could try to sway me. Maybe somebody else deserves to be there over Alabama. I think the thing about Alabama is kind of like I talked about with Texas, there's a certain floor. I just think Kalen DeBoer, for whatever reason, has been closer to that floor in his first 2 years. I think he's still figuring out how to win at a place like Alabama. This is a whole different ball game for him, even though he is a great coach. And he had the success at Washington and Fresno State, and his record as a head coach was insane going into Alabama. He hasn't figured it out yet. I think he's trending in the right direction. I think a lot of people are maybe sleeping on Alabama for this upcoming season, but as far as program goes, I don't think that they're far enough removed from the pedigree that Nick Saban had them at for me to really argue that somebody else should be elevated more so towards the top. I did think about Texas A&M, strongly considered them and the strength of that program going forward. I'm just waiting to see it more sustained. And I did also think about LSU, but the problem is we have still not seen this story with Lane Kiffin yet. I think both of those programs can be higher.
I want to stop you there. Okay? You mentioned LSU. I think the only program that you could replace Alabama at the number 3 spot is LSU. And the reason I say this is because let's remember this is not a system that we haven't seen before. It's the same system that Lane Kiffin brought over from Ole Miss with Will Stein, his OC. They retained LSU's defensive coordinator, who did a magnificent job last year. Let's be honest, I can't stand Lane Kiffin, but you got to give it to him. He's a hell of a coach. He knows how to coach the game.
100%. But the big question marks are not going to come from being a great head coach. It's going to be, can he build a championship level culture? And the real question is did that championship level, that competition, the competitive level that they were able to accomplish, was that in spite of Lane Kiffin and built off of, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, at Ole Miss though, was that ability for them to get a little bit farther than what people frankly expected them to do? Was that because they were kind of trying to respond to the adversity of losing a head coach, and they responded or what?
Well, there's multiple things that kind of go into it. I think that them responding, the players themselves had a big aspect to go into it. And then I also think that Will Stein staying around and sticking around for the playoffs to help out with offensive play calling, I think that that's going to be Pete Golding's downfall right there.
You mean Charlie Weiss Jr., right?
Or Charlie Weiss Jr., not Will Stein. I'm sorry.
You got Oregon on the brain.
Yeah, I got Oregon on the brain, yeah. But no, Charlie Weiss Jr. sticking around at Ole Miss to help call the plays offensively, I think that's going to be one of Pete Golding's downfalls, is I haven't seen that man be able to kind of formulate offense and be able to be a play caller on that side of the ball. Ole Miss's defense struggled last year. Let's hope he gets that resolved through the transfer portal. But I think that this is a system that we've already seen in Ole Miss. It works. The only question mark that I have for LSU is Sam Levitt going to be able to go? If Sam Levitt's not going to be able to go, then that poses a problem. Yeah. I know they got Hassan Longstreet from USC, the redshirt freshman, but I really don't like quarterbacks who have no starting experience. I don't think it wins you championships, especially in this era of football, like we've seen. All four of the quarterbacks in this year's playoff, believe it or not, were transfer portal quarterbacks with playing experience. So I think that poses a big issue if he's not ready to go. But I think that's really the only program that you could possibly switch out Alabama with.
Well, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree there. But as far as LSU, we could talk about that a little bit more. But if we're comparing Alabama, LSU, A&M versus Ohio State, we're obviously taking Ohio State there, right?
Yeah. Because okay. I think Alabama is not at where Ohio State's at just yet. LSU, like you said, we haven't really seen it yet, so that's kind of an assumption take. So we can't make that yet. And then Texas A&M, I'm going to be honest with you. The only reason Texas A&M made the playoff last year was because of the majority of their SEC games were not inside the top 7 of the SEC. So
so let's dive deeper into that because A&M is 4, and the biggest reason why is yes, I do agree with you that they did play the bottom of the SEC, and that was a big contributor. But with that being said, I think that the strong, stark difference between Jimbo Fisher's culture and Mike Elko's culture is why, in the long run, A&M can build off of that. And I think A&M is going to be a really good team that's being slept on coming up this upcoming season. I think that they're going to be really good in years to come. Mike Elko does not lose. You want to talk about a guy who knows how to win. He took over at Duke, instant upgrade, had 2 really successful seasons at Duke, and then ended up going to A&M and getting them to the playoff. You know, even if they played the bottom of the SEC, Jimbo was never doing what Elko did. So I think because of the strength of the culture and the confidence I have there, that's why I have A&M above my 5 and 6.
Okay. Don't get me wrong. I like Mike Elko. I like the trajectory of Texas A&M as a football program, but I would put LSU above them. We saw the year out of Mike Elko. They made the playoffs. They're the only team that I can remember that quite literally went 11-1 and still missed their conference championship.
Well, Ole Miss did too.
Yeah, Ole Miss did too. But Ole Miss was a little different. They got the loss earlier in the year. Mike Elko lost the last game of the year, the very last game of the year. But I love Mike Elko. I love the trajectory. But in the same breath that you said, Colin, we talked about Lane Kiffin being able to set up a national championship winning culture. I don't think that we've seen Mike Elko do that for A&M yet. You know what I'm saying? And if you're going to go based off cultures of A&M and the culture of LSU, let's not forget LSU's the 3 out of the last 4 coaches that coached at LSU all won national championship. So I think that the culture and also the NIL that LSU has and LSU has pledged, I think is going to work out in favor of Lane Kiffin.
That's fair. I'm not going to get... No, we don't need to do that. He had good points. He didn't necessarily sway me. He got me thinking about it for sure. I'm going to keep A&M at 4 for now. Who's your number 4 for the Big Ten?
My number 4 for the Big Ten, state of the program, I'm going to go with USC. Coming off a great recruiting class, the only question that I have about USC is Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley needs to prove to me that he's capable of developing a defense. He didn't do it at Oklahoma. He hasn't done it at USC. And that's been the really only thing that's been holding him back from being at a national championship level. But they have a lot of talent. They just hired a new DC. I can't remember his name. You know it, Bosch, because we were
Gary
talking
Patterson.
about TCU days. Yeah, Gary Patterson. I do like that hire. And I think that USC is going to finish in the top 4 this year in the Big Ten, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to go that direction. I think there's really 2 teams you could debate there, and I think number 6 should be pretty obvious for the Big Ten. We'll see what direction you go there. Either way, A&M or LSU, I'd probably take A&M or LSU there. And for me, it's A&M. I would take A&M over USC. The known that we have with A&M is a lot more comfortable than USC, because at the end of the day, all the talent that you're going to be able to bring in, how good is the defense going to be? How good are you going to be up front? Can you compete at the high level? I have confidence that A&M under Elko always will. I don't have confidence that USC will, and that's why I think state of the program right now, I would take A&M.
I would take A&M as well. I think that Elko was one of those guys that the only thing that was holding him back at Duke was Duke, and now that he's got a program like Texas A&M, I think that the trajectory is going to go nowhere but up for A&M.
All right, at number 5, I do have LSU there. We already had plenty of discussion about LSU. NIL money, the winner that Lane Kiffin became at Ole Miss. This should be successful. There is a chance that the disaster dreams that John Whalen has, that hate of Lane Kiffin and hate of LSU, it ends up happening. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to be great. I think by year end, you could certainly have a situation where I'm going to think that LSU is one of the best 3 programs in the SEC. But for now, I think it's safe to say number 5, seeing, I think we have to see it with Lane Kiffin first, and we got to see it mesh well and be a good fit. How about you with number 5 in the Big Ten?
Number 5 in the Big Ten, I have Michigan. Look, Michigan's one of those programs that, just like Ohio State, is going to consistently live in the top 10 or top 5 of the Big Ten. I put them at 5 just because we haven't seen Kyle Whittingham yet. At Michigan, Kyle Whittingham, phenomenal coach, phenomenal. Nothing but praise for that guy. He brought a lot of pieces from Utah that are going to be exciting at Michigan. And also Bryce Underwood's second year, he's actually being developed by a quarterback coach. And I think that, I know you don't like him, Bosch, but hear me out. I think that Bryce Underwood, I keep saying young, man, could possibly be a top 4, maybe even a top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten this year. And that's no joke. Dude has the skill set of Cam Newton. He just needs to put it into effect.
Chill with that. I don't think he's as athletic. I think his athleticism is a little overblown. It's still good. I think it's not Cam Newton level.
Here's the thing. I think that it is. It just needs to be untapped, bro. Like, I'm not saying that he's going to be the next Cam Newton. I'm just saying if we look at the raw components there, that's the comparison, man.
I mean, yeah, we don't need to really get into too much of a side conversation. Ultimately, if he's got that potential, we'll see if it comes out. I think the big thing when you're debating LSU versus Michigan is one of them, no matter the coach. I mean, we saw Les Miles. I think he was a good coach, but not best in the sport type of guy. He was able to win there. Ed Orgeron, who was not a great coach, was able to win there. I think that there's always that championship expectation at LSU. I think Lane Kiffin, what he's gone through, he's more weathered for it. Kyle Whittingham, strong culture, built on toughness, always going to have a pretty high floor. However, the national championship expectations that will be put on him, the more successful that Michigan is something that him and his staff has never dealt with at Utah. And because of that, I think that this is a new territory for Whittingham, something he's never been in, which is why I got to give the nod to LSU as far as state of the program goes.
I'll have to give it to LSU too. And like I said, it's almost given me like deja vu. The last time LSU won a national championship in 2019, they had an offensive mastermind as an OC in Joe Brady. I see the same thing in Charlie Weiss Jr. So,
yep. All right, number 6 program in the SEC. I'm going to take Oklahoma right now. I think that Brent Venables will find consistency here. It's not going to be the 6-win, 10-win, 6-win, 10-win back and forth. I think that last year was a good statement that, look, even with a struggling offense, John Mateer didn't look good the back half of the year. They couldn't really be dynamic on offense. They had no run game at all, and yet their defense was still dominant. I think that was the start of the beginning of year in, year out, Oklahoma having, at the very least, a top 10 to top 15 defense every single year. At the bottom, and at the best, they're one of the best in the country. So I think Oklahoma being established as the 6th best program with the potential raising of the ceiling for this program and for this team individually is going to be based on how successful they're going to be on offense. I think it's fair to put Oklahoma at 6.
I'm
You
not,
don't like
I'm
that
not,
one, do you?
I don't like that one. I might be a little biased. I would put Tennessee at 6. I'm not gonna lie. The reason I like Tennessee in the now and also the future trajectory is Brent Venables. We got to see him be able to, like Lincoln Riley with his defense. We got to see him be able to develop an offense. I'm not the biggest John Mateer believer. Yes, he had the injury, but what you guys also have to think about is even when he came back from the injury, it was not the injury itself that was, like a huge detriment to John Mateer. His pass mechanics were all over the place, and it was like that all season. We just didn't really want to recognize it because he threw 400 yards against Baylor at the beginning of the year.
Right.
I mean, I don't. I would put Tennessee there just because the quarterback room specifically, the future is very bright there. And also, I think that there's been certain coordinator and position coaches and, people hired around the facility that's going to get Tennessee on the up and up. I think that they're going to be dangerous. Jim Knowles, you know him, Colin. I think that it's going to take a year or two. I do. We also got, Poindexter as the secondaries coach. And the biggest hire of them all that no one's talking about is Derek Owings, the strength and conditioning coach from Indiana. Fun stat for you. Tennessee's roster this offseason already has added a total of 113 pounds of pure muscle mass. That's ridiculous in a single offseason. There's been 11 players that have added 11 plus pounds in pure muscle, which is huge. So I like the trajectory of Tennessee a little bit more than Oklahoma. But I mean, it is debatable because Oklahoma, you're never going to have to worry about them having a bad defense with Brent Venables. For my number 6, it's a battle between two.
Yep, I figured.
And this is tough. I like Penn State. I do. Just because the culture's already set up there. I think Matt Campbell was the obvious hire. I think that that's where they should have started instead of circling all the way around the world just to pick him back up. I like Matt Campbell as a head coach. And I think that he's going to do good at Penn State. I think that he can get them over the hump like James Franklin was not able to do? I'm not sure. but I do trust Matt Campbell to have 10 and 11 win seasons at Penn State. So I'm going to go with Penn State.
We could have a conversation about Tennessee, Oklahoma, Penn State, and Iowa. I'm assuming were your two that you were
That was
debating.
my two. Yep, that
Yeah.
was.
Either way, I don't see this is. I'm not trying to hate on Tennessee or anything like that. I think Tennessee and Penn State would be a closer conversation. I think what distinguishes Oklahoma is their ceiling and their attractability between them and Penn State. So keeping the Oklahoma Tennessee debate aside, because I don't really think we should dive into that right now. And within conference play, we definitely will have discussions about the SEC as a whole, and I guarantee you that comparison will come up in the future. I would take Oklahoma right now as a program. I think that their ceiling is a little bit higher. I think that Penn State, you got a guy in Matt Campbell that's kind of like Whittingham, used to 8-9 wins being a successful season and being viewed as a great coach there. How do you elevate a program into national championship contending status, which James Franklin was never able to do? We'll see if Matt Campbell falls into kind of the same thing, even though he did it over a longer period of time than James Franklin at Vanderbilt. James Franklin was the same thing to Vanderbilt that Matt Campbell was for Iowa State. So we got to see them be able to be elevated there. I think Oklahoma is a little bit more attractive. And they've also had the running board up to this point to kind of have the sustainability for the future really put into place there at Oklahoma. So I'd take Oklahoma. You'd probably take Tennessee no matter what anyway over Penn State. So
I'll say this, and here's the thing: you'll probably not agree with this, but I'm gonna say it. Either Oklahoma or Tennessee, I think either of those teams I'd take over Penn State as of right now. Could that change in the future? Most definitely. Matt Campbell's a great head coach. He could possibly do it for Penn State, but we don't know yet. With Oklahoma and with Tennessee, at least you already have that foundation set of culture. So I think either Oklahoma or Tennessee, I would take either of those schools over Penn State.
Okay, so my number 7 would be Tennessee. Your number 7 would be Iowa. We're at a stalemate 3-3. Just wrapping it up with this, do you think the offensive struggles for Iowa is the big difference when comparing Tennessee and Iowa, and you would go Tennessee in that respect?
Well, here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to play the non-bias card, because this is where I'm going to get after my own team here. Yes, Iowa has not really been able to sum up an offense. But here's my thing with Tennessee, and this is what pisses me off about my own team, okay? We can never seem to get the defense and the offense right at the same time. It's always one or the other. So we're very similar to Iowa whenever it comes to only having one half of the puzzle piece. I would preferably take Tennessee just because of the fact that because it's a rotating door where you can't get one right in the same season. I think that a broken clock is right at least once a day, and it's finally going to line up at one point. Whereas Iowa, they can just never sum up an offense, and that's just been the story. So I would personally take Tennessee.
So it's a slight lean 4-3 for us if we're going 7 deep. It kind of as like a tiebreaker. We can't go all the way through unless you guys want to be here for 2.5 hours, which I can't do. I got to go to work, and he's got to go to sleep. So we're going to wrap it there. I think it was a good discussion for sure. Kind of the establishment, again, that we have is that the same conclusion that everybody kind of goes to. The top of the Big Ten, probably stronger, but the depth of the SEC, probably stronger. That's just kind of what we're looking at. Which one matters more to you? Do you care more about the depth, 1 through 16 or 1 through 18 in the Big Ten's case? Or do you care more about who rises to the top? That's the question you got to ask yourself as a viewer. That's the type of discussion that we're going to be having in TikTok Lives and all this stuff. You can follow him over at Vols by 50 Network on TikTok. You can follow me if you just look up Bash CFB or just look up my name right there. John Wayland Hollis, not here today. He's usually our host. Hopefully, we get him back soon and get him in a stable situation there. Yeah, good discussion, Isaac. Really appreciated it. Just a little caveat before we go here. These podcasts, both podcasts and on Spotify and YouTube, I know for sure YouTube, they're going to be posted a little later. Spotify might be a little bit earlier. Be patient with us. We're working through some stuff right now. This, at the latest, will be posted by Saturday morning. I'm hoping to get it posted here Friday night. No further discussion on that. Just a little channel update. Isaac, send us away.
Oh, bye.